Well, good evening, everyone. Another evening of Brian Live. Thanks so much for joining us. Got a really special guest this evening, and another Dash 8 pilot, except not a normal Dash 8, a 747 Dash 8 pilot. Little dig at the ex-Sax guys that might be listening there tonight. John Kearney, it's fantastic to have you on the show. It's been a long time coming. I think we were supposed to have you on about a month back, and then with simulator schedules and you traveling up and down, didn't quite make it, but you're here now. Welcome, man.
Gents, thank you very much. What a privilege, what an honor to be on the show. And I do apologize for the issues we had last month, but as you said, sometimes work gets in the way. So I'm glad we've got the opportunity tonight, and looking forward to chatting with you and getting some questions from former friends and colleagues and the other listeners and family who have tuned in tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, John, thanks, man, for your time and for making yourself available tonight with us. It really has been more than a couple of months in the making to try and get this all together. And yeah, I'm glad we finally made it happen. I suppose just to start it off, I think, John, let's go back on our history a little bit. You and I have been good friends for, what's it going on, just over 20 odd years now?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We did work it out to the second over some beers at your house not too long ago. But absolutely, it's over 20 years now of friendship that we've known each other, worked together, and just had fantastic times together with us and our families. So loads of history. It's fantastic.
It's been a good couple of decades and just a good friendship. And I mean, I think I've been very privileged to watch you.
Can I join in there as well, guys? Cheers. Eh?
Yeah. You can be part of the bromance as well, right?
I was always a little bit jealous, John, because obviously Ryan and I have been big mates for a long time. And then I would, on a Monday, you would come in and say, "Hey, I spent the weekend with my mate John Kearney," and I always thought, this bloody bastard, he acts as I'm his best mate. Meanwhile, on the side, he's got some other chum that he rides his bike with and drinks and counts how many seconds they've known each other as mates.
No, the problem was I sold the Harley Davidson and I stopped riding the rides, and then I didn't see you for a long time, right? So
yeah, you're right.
Yes, it's if the missus would allow me to get a bike again, we can start doing those good rides again. We had some good Sunday morning rides, all of us.
Yeah, I think those days are quite far in the future for all of us. Now we've got to be sort of responsible and do the dad thing.
100%.
Yeah, but yeah, man, it's been quite cool for me. I've had front row seats to your career, and you've had quite a remarkable career as an aviator. And I think let's chat about that tonight, man. Why don't we get started? We can talk about maybe where we got started back in the Aquarius Ops days. Fond memories of that with lemon scented spray.
Yep. No word of a lie. Absolutely. Well, to make a short story longer or a long story short, I started my flying career in 1999. In my matric high school year, in fact. On my 17th birthday, my parents gave me the choice of doing a university education or doing my PPL. So being young and eager as I was at 17, I decided to do the PPL. So I started with my PPL January of 99, in my last year of high school. And flew over the weekends and holidays, and I basically finished my PPL just before I matriculated. Finished school in 99, then realized I'm in the big wide world now. I've got a PPL there in my hands. I turned down the university education, which in hindsight would have been a good safety net, especially in today's current times. But be that as it may, I decided to crack on and pursue my commercial license and see where I could go from there. So I started my career in aviation insurance, in fact, doing aviation underwriting. And my boss, who owned the company, had an airplane. So part of my remuneration every month was to get some free hours in the 172, which is where I met Ryan at good old days of Foster Aero and whatnot, and his whole family was involved in aviation at the airport in various different sectors. And I then got offered a job with Aquarius Aviation to work in the flight operations department as a gopher, literally a real dog's body, doing everything from refueling aeroplanes to rostering to driving crew and mechanics around, sorting out catering 7 days a week. We were in standby 24 hours a day. And I was on my own doing it for a while, and Ryan then joined the team in flight operations, along with one or two other guys. And we actually formed a really good flight ops team. We managed ourselves as schedulers and whatnot, taught ourselves a lot of skills, along with some of the more senior pilots there. And I landed up finishing my commercial license while working for Aquarius in flight operations. At which stage, one of our sister companies, King Air Services, then offered me a job flying caravans around Sudan and the Congo. So went off on my own at about the age of 21 and couldn't boil an egg. I still remember going as a passenger up to Kinshasa in the company King Air 200, sitting in the back with enough food to last me 4 weeks, which was just soy mince. It was soy mince and frozen ready-made meals, whatever I could get. And I realized after about my second week, if I don't teach myself how to cook, I'm going to die of boredom or starvation out here. It was a good opportunity to get some hours under the belt and actually start cooking, and met a lot of my colleagues who I'm still in very, very good contact with today. And I'm sure a lot of those guys are watching the show tonight as well. So yeah, flew for King Air Services for around 2.5, 3 years, on eventually the caravan and both the King Air 200. At which stage I then reapplied to Aquarius when they got their Fokker F-28 jets. Put in an application, had just finished my ATP subjects, and I went knocking on Gavin Branson's door. And Gavin was just a truly fantastic guy for me. He gave me so many breaks in my aviation career, both in flight operations and both for my first jet job. And I still remember it was a Friday afternoon. I did the interview, and they said, "Well, can you start on Monday?" I said, "Fantastic." So a week later, I was sitting in France with Gavin Hill as my sim partner.
That's gone down well.
It was great, and we had a fantastic instructor, Fiera Webb, who sadly passed away last week, which was very sad.
Wow.
And what a gentleman, and so much experience with SAA and Luxair and various airlines around the world. And he was just humble and a gentleman, and what a great instructor for my first jet job. I think Gavin would attest to that as well. So yeah, finished some training, and then spent about a year with Aquarius again, flying the F-28s for various contracts. Back in the Sudan, back in the Congo, we had some really exciting contracts out of Baghdad, being based in Amman in Jordan and flying schedules into Baghdad, doing spiral descents and spiral climbs under military control. That kind of stuff one will never get a chance to do again these days with focus systems, but it was the only way we could get in and out and to be in the protected zones. So that was some extremely exciting flying. And at that stage, we had a contract with South African Express Airways, SA Express, and they were looking for crew. So I put in the CV, and very fortunate to have got the job at SAX. I know the words South African Express at the moment is a big bone of contention for
A swear word.
a lot
Yeah.
of people, including you guys.
Yeah.
But as you guys will know, when we were there, it was one of the airlines to work for in South Africa.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
well run, flying new airplanes. They were expanding. They looked after the crew extremely well. It was a fantastic airline to be with. And yeah, I had a very good 3 years of SA Express on the Dash A300 and the Q400. And then Kome came along and joined Kome. It would have been about 12 years ago. And joined initially in the 737 300 400 series for about 2 years. And then at that stage, I was busy fading out the 737 200s and getting in 737 800s. I was next in line for a 737 800 rating. And I saw myself at Kome for a long time. So I really wanted to fly the 737 200. So I volunteered because they were looking for 4 volunteers just to fly the 737 200 for a year before they got phased out. And so, yeah, I did a 737 200 course, flew the 200, 300, 400 concurrently, and had the honor of doing the very, very last 737 200 flight for Kome before they retired them. So that was very, very special. Yeah, then did the 737 800 rating. Eventually got my command at Kome, and boy, I thought, this is it. This is where I'm going to retire. Really enjoying it. Well-run airline once again, private company. They knew how to run the airline, and they looked after us very, very nicely. I happened to be sitting at a Sunday breakfast one morning with some friends, and I bumped into an SA colleague of mine, and he says, "There's a company overseas that's looking for cargo pilots in a 747-8." And he says, maybe a very good opportunity for you. At that stage, you had to be under the age of 40. You had to have some jet command hours. I thought I didn't have a chance. I thought about it, spoke to some friends who were working for the airline, put in a CV, and next thing I knew, I'd been offered the job. And yeah, I've been flying overseas now on the freighter 747s for about 5 years now. Small little sabbatical in between on the passenger side, for the 787 for a very short while, and now back on the 747-8 freighter. And it's great. We work hard and we play hard. We away for a few weeks at a time, and then I've got some fantastic time at home to spend with my family, my young daughter, my wife, and just catch up with my friends and my family. So really, I think I'm very fortunate to kind of have the best of both worlds, where we can still be flying and I can still have some time off at home every month to just catch up with my life and with the downtime, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John, while we're talking about that, maybe I can throw a somewhat difficult question, I suppose, because it's certainly something I felt. How difficult was it? I know you went through a difficult patch too, when you weren't entirely sure, are you going to get called back? What's going to happen? And you're sitting in South Africa, wondering, what's going to happen? What are you going to do if you don't go back and fly? Fortunately, you got the call back. You went back. You started operating. But how difficult was it to fit in with your existing friends, who a huge majority of them are aviators, and so many of them aren't flying? I'm sure there was the odd, difficult braai and stuff amongst friends to, on one hand, be, happy that you've still got a job and can still do what you love, but it's so difficult being around guys that you have this deep sense of sadness for, because you know how happy flying a heavy machine makes you, and you can only imagine how difficult it is for so many others. I mean, you know, 50, what do they say? 50% of the aviators around the world that were flying in 2019 are not flying right now. It's a huge number of people. How did you handle that personally? And I don't mean to put you on the spot with it. I mean, just as
No.
a fellow friend, how did that feel for you?
It was devastating. Honestly, when this pandemic hit, beginning of last year, the industry was in one of its, especially in Asia and overseas, the industry was just going from strength to strength and booming. Airlines had placed orders for huge amounts of airplanes and lots of training. And a lot of my friends were busy on relevant training for different airlines all over the world, between the Middle East, between Asia, Europe, and whatnot. Everyone excited to finally get this break to go fly the heavy metal, you know, hopefully earn an offshore salary, some dollars or sterling. And let's be honest, you know, a lot of us live good lifestyles. You know, we like the finer things in life, the bikes, the nice whiskey, nice houses. You know, so many pilots are not financial advisors, and we might be good at flying airplanes, but a lot of us maybe haven't prepared so well for long-term unemployment. So when this hit, and guys were all of a sudden, literally overnight, being sent home from various parts of the world, some of them just being dismissed totally, and some of them on furlough, some of them on unpaid leave, or some of them on a very small retainer. Everybody was looking for different options, myself included. I had 6 months in limbo before I knew what my situation was going to be. That 6 months alone was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I was very fortunate. I had savings, and thank goodness I had those savings. I've got no secondary form of income. A lot of my colleagues have got businesses on the side or whatnot. I didn't. One starts thinking very, very quickly how to start getting back on your feet. And I tried. I set up an online drop shipping store, but unfortunately, the logistics in South Africa when drop shipping from overseas, it is not so easy. I tried it. It didn't work for me. In the meantime, keeping in touch with friends and colleagues who were in the same situation. And I must say, kudos to just about every single person I know. Guys took the bulls by the horns and started industries and businesses that they had no experience of whatsoever. And a lot of them have been extremely successful in their new enterprises. I was in fact speaking to friends this morning who branched out totally from flying. They said if they get the opportunity to go back to work again or to fly an aeroplane, they are not certain if they would actually take it.
Really?
So yes, so yeah, sitting with my friends, it was devastating.
Yeah, it's
But yeah, I do believe it.
Phew.
Go
Listening
ahead,
to you
Brian.
talk about it, sorry, John, it brings a lot of emotions, you know, back to me as well, because I can hear the way you're speaking about it is genuinely coming
Man.
from the heart. It's such a difficult thing, and as you say, to all the people that actually went out and did something and created something, and even if you didn't, even if you just managed to stay sane and stay at home and look after your immediate surroundings, then that's also fine. You know, this idea that you have to go start this grand thing or this grand business. And I like what you said. And I wasn't even going to ask you this question, but I love this idea. Well, you said you were doing a drop shipping business, and you tried it. and maybe it could have worked had you stuck with it a bit longer, or the opportunity to go fly hadn't come up, but whatever it might be. But there's a certain element of, you're allowed to try something and you're allowed to fail at that thing. And I like that, John. I like that response to that, because that's a cool thing. I tried it. There was a few issues that you picked up. You wouldn't have known those issues had you not tried it.
Well,
And I
absolutely.
think that's really cool.
I can't remember the exact statistics about entrepreneurs, but 1 out of every 40 or 50 business opportunities only comes into fruition. The other 39 or 49 don't work. And kudos to those guys who just persevere and persevere. And same to you guys. The Brian Air podcast has come in leaps and bounds. And what started off as a hobby has become a full-time interest for you two, and has become a polished show with thousands of viewers. So, I mean, I think you two are a classic example of seizing a moment and turning a fairly crappy situation into something very positive. So well done.
Thanks, John.
Oh, thanks, Pat. Yeah, I appreciate that compliment. Coming from you, man, it means a lot. I think, we saw in the middle of last year with this whole mess. First of all, to get back into flying, you are going to be competing with thousands and thousands of highly experienced, highly qualified pilots out there. So, kind of made me on a personal level feel, well, gee whiz, am I really going to go and try and stand in that queue? And like when Brian gave me the opportunity to join him on the podcast, it was an awesome time to seize an opportunity and try something different. And I think what's made it work for us is the element of positivity that we get from each other, and the excitement and the fulfillment of pushing the positivity out to everyone out there that needs it so much. But yeah, you hit a nail on the head there when you said earlier that pilots are inherently very bad business people, and I think that's probably what got a lot of guys nervous about starting something new. Is like, well, I don't know anything about business. But the fact that you at least tried and put yourself out there, that speaks volumes about your personality traits and your determination to survive this whole world of chaos right now.
No, well, thank you. And when I got invited on the show, I knew I had some pretty big shoes to fill with your previous guests. Every single guest you've had on the show up to date have just been so successful with new ventures. With Mike Mason down in Natal, with Jason and the guys and the various apps and networking systems that they've set up for the industry. It's phenomenal. So yes, very big shoes to fill indeed.
Yeah, there have been a lot of guys have done a lot of things, and it is quite amazing when you look at the remarkable things some of the guys have achieved. And had it not been, including ourselves, had it not been for the pandemic, I can guarantee that we would not be here this evening chatting to you, although you would probably still be in your current position. So even for Ryan and myself, it's very difficult now to even answer the question, do we want to go back and fly an aircraft? And one of the reasons, John, is I think, and you might be able to relate to this, when it gets to the point where you realize, okay, I can't go and fly, I'm not going to go fly, you either dive into something else full tilt, or you kind of go in half-heartedly in a sort of a 50-50 tackle and come off second best. And I think, myself having Ryan there with me, it made it easy, because we dived into it and said, right, we're going to do this thing. We don't know what we're doing, but we'll learn every week. We'll take a little bit here, a little bit there, and we'll make it work. And we are by no means there, but I think that attitude that, in a way, I said from the start, I still think I've got a little thing going on the bottom there that we support the Mango Airline staff at the moment right now. And I still maintain, I think the South African Express guys are some of the luckiest guys around. It happened so early on, and it's forced our hand early enough to go and make a difference elsewhere. Alan's watching tonight. He's in Canada. I know there's a whole bunch of people that have gone and done things on the basis that Saks was doing so poorly. You actually had to start thinking of, what am I going to do if? And it's maybe some people might not quite relate to what I'm saying there, but I certainly think that some of the Saks guys were lucky in that. And just to think of the Mango guys now going through what they're going through at this stage, when a lot of the aviators have already dealt with this initial anxiety, this initial pain of what if we don't get paid next month again, and what if I have to move on. It's such a difficult situation. It's terrible.
It's a really, really horrible situation. And sadly, the situation in South Africa is always a few years behind the rest of the world. When all this started last year, and America was one of the hardest hit aviation-wise, I think 60-70% of the guys furloughed, sent away on unpaid leave. And a year and a half later, the airlines in the US cannot employ enough guys. They cannot. The big three, Delta, United, American, paying big signing bonuses. The smaller carriers just need crew desperately. Yeah. And you normally see, once the US starts with the trend, the rest of the world will start catching up. So sadly, I think South Africa still has to go through that dip, and things will start picking up in the next year or so. They have to. So I just hope the guys will just have the patience, use the time off as a great opportunity to learn new skills, start a new business, try something different. You'll be back in air again. I have no doubt about that.
You actually answered one of my next question that I had for you, John, was, do you think, based on the rebound that the US is experiencing at the moment, that it will filter through? And so you answered that question, but do you think that, based on all your connections and being such an experienced world traveler, on your observations, do you think that there's going to be a bit of an experience gap in aviation going forward, as guys like you've totally mentioned now, friends of yours that have decided if the opportunity comes back, they probably won't go back to flying? So what does that mean for aviation going forward? I've got a big question mark surrounding that in my mind.
I think the guys are going to be sitting with two major issues. You're going to have a big experience gap, or guys who are not current and haven't flown in a while. And then you're sitting on the other end of the spectrum where you've got guys very close to retirement. And when you look at the stats worldwide of global retirements in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be guys who will be getting upgrades very quickly. There will be a lot of movement happening worldwide again. And I think with any company, if the training system is correct, there should be no problem or no need for concern for an experience gap like that. To get the guys current again, to treat them to the company's SOPs, I think is absolutely no problem. And it's been shown all over the world, whether you're a fan of it or not, but these multi-crew pilot license courses that guys are sent on, where they've never had the opportunity to fly a single crew around the bush, or in a caravan, or as Ryan did for a long time, flying Cherokees around the Lowveld. Guys learn a lot of experience like that. But if you're being trained to fly just in an airline environment and the training is done correctly, I think the airlines will cope. I think they will.
John, would you say your grounding at not grounding as in flight grounding, but your personal grounding as a pilot at SA Express and Comair has helped you to where you are in your career now? And I've always thought, the training that we got at SAX was great,
It
and
was unbelievable.
and I can only imagine at Comair, the training is superb. I mean, how much did that influence your career to where you are now?
Well, I think that was the absolute grassroots of my, well, let me rephrase it. Having training in those two companies was, I think, some of the best in the world. And it literally prepares one to be ready for any airline in the world, I think. I really do. And just backtracking a little bit, in the days when we were doing our PPLs and commercial pilot licenses, there were very few sort of aviation academies like your Progresses and your 42 air schools. A lot of the flying schools were sort of more like flying clubs, and it wasn't as structured as it is now. Guys coming through the system, there isn't a flight school around that I know of that hasn't adapted that academy sort of way of training, where the discipline is a lot higher. Guys have to wear a uniform. They have to attend classes. I think the actual method of instruction, the syllabus, has become a lot more refined as well. So I think that's setting the younger guys up a lot more for the airline way of training, especially with the CRM element and stuff that carry into it. So I was still quite young when I joined SA Express, and the very formal, well-structured training syllabus and systems that they had were, I think, the best thing that ever happened to me, because it prepares you for your career going forward for the rest of your life. Same for Kearney, one of the best training academies in South Africa, no doubt.
But John, knowing you as well, you're quite a dedicated and hardworking pilot. I know I can attest to the amount of hard work that you do. But what would be the advice that you would give to young guys coming up through the system now that they're just getting started out? We're seeing them quite often now, 250, 300 hours, and they're going straight onto the likes of ERJs and that. And it's kind of difficult to try and really get the message across to some of these guys, the need for the hard work, the effort, the dedication that goes in. And, from someone who's at the top of the game like yourself, what advice can you offer these youngsters?
Sure. Yeah, it's a very good question, Ryan, but they have to have the passion. I've seen so many young aviators and pilots out there who decided to go into flying because of I think it's glamorous, which, as we all can attest to, it's not. Maybe from the outside it might seem like that. Maybe because it looks good. Maybe they got forced into it, living through some parent's dream. These are the guys who historically will probably at a later stage change their careers or do something else. So I think from the get-go, you have to have the passion and you have to have the motivation, because, as you know, it's not easy. But flying an airplane is one thing. It's your 6 monthly recurrent checks, your current training, your current checks, keeping a medical. Yeah. So I think these guys just have to realize from the get-go, and I honestly think there should be some sort of system in place that the young guys wanting to start flying should sit down and get briefed as to how the rest of their 45-year flying career will be.
Yeah.
Do they realize they're going to miss kids' birthdays? They're going to miss funerals. They're going to miss parties. Weekends, public holidays, they don't exist anymore. Jet lag, tired, working someone else's schedule. They've got to realize that it's not glamorous.
Yeah.
Yes, sitting 35,000 foot watching a sunrise over Siberia makes it worth it every single day. And those are the moments we live for. And that's when we realize why we do what we do. So I think the youngsters of today, number one, have to have the passion, and they have to fully understand what they're getting themselves into. There's been times, especially the last year or so, where I think, wow, this has been really, really, really tough. Why didn't I go into IT like my dad said when I was 19 years old?
Yeah, because you were stuck overseas when South Africa went into lockdown, correct? So it was what, about 7 months before you saw your family?
That's right. It was 6 months overseas and still another 2 weeks of government paid hotel quarantine, which was probably the most depressing part, because if you look out your window and use an imagination, you can see your house, but you just can't get it for 2 weeks. So yeah, it was effectively 6.5 months before I got to sleep in my own bed again and see my family. That was nightmarish.
Yeah, I certainly take my hat off to you guys that are making that sacrifice, because it's not easy. It's a catch-22 for us as aviators. Those who aren't in the flight deck anymore, but those who are, but who have to make those further sacrifices just to keep a roof over their heads.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
absolutely
quite tough.
But yeah, I still probably wouldn't change things, to be honest with you. I couldn't see myself not flying. It's there's some days at work that are just make every single sacrifice worth it, really. So keep the passion.
Yeah, it's a great answer, John. It's really, really a nice answer, and the exact answer I expected from someone like yourself. There's been a definite shift that's happened over the last, I'd say, 6 to 12 months, I suppose, where, and you might not have realized this yourself, because in your environment you're actually quite isolated, and I realized that when we sort of exited our old environment of SACS, and I suppose you even more affected by this, but you're actually quite an influential aviator from a South African perspective right now. You're someone that South African aviation can be very, very proud of.
Thank you.
You don't go. Sorry, I put myself on mute. You don't go blurting out a podcast like we do every week, but you're there, and you've got a story to tell, even if that story is from a mentoring type of angle. And I think what Ryan was alluding to there in his question was, we see a lot of youngsters that want what you have right now. They want to be doing the long haul back and forth to see their family, and they want to be doing the fun flying on the big 747 without, like you said, Ryan, flying around the Cherokee or doing all those kind of hard yards. And maybe just walk us through that. And one of the questions I was going to ask you later was, who's influenced you in your career, but also what's influenced you. I'm sure there's been a couple of things that have made you think twice about, hey, I must be careful not to do that again, or let me make sure I do this. Jason Northwood spoke to us a few weeks back about preparation and his personal preparation he's done. Ryan and I spoke at length today. We got together just to chat about this interview tonight. And Ryan, of course, knows you a bit better than what I know you, and just filling me in. But we had a nice conversation, because everything Ryan was telling me are all these things that we kind of talk about in the classroom. You're kind of a model type person, without just trying to prop you up for no reason. You're a real aviator from the outside. But I'm sure there's some things that have happened that have influenced where you are right now. And I'm sure those things were difficult. And it's those difficulties, certainly for me, that have influenced where I am today. The easy stuff, had life been easy, maybe it would have been an easier life, but I wouldn't change things once. Everything that's happened has happened, and it's influenced the next step. And I'm sure you the same, from those early days at at Aquarius to little things you picked up at Saks, little things you picked up at Comair. No doubt, a lot of the difficult times were the things that have influenced further decisions.
Well, it's quite a hard question to answer in general, because I think there are just so many factors that do surround people's influences in life. And I think it probably all starts right in the early days, where you're sitting as a PPL with about 50 hours under your belt, and you want to start preparing for the next level as your CPL. And you remember all the old training captains and instructors, there was one book that said, you've got to read Flying the Big Jets or Handling the Big Jets. There were two. There was Flying the Big Jets and Handling the Big Jets.
Yeah.
So we all went with 100 hours, and we bought this book that was written
It's
in
a hard
the
read.
60s or the 70s. And on the cover is a 747 classic touching down. You think, oh, this is going to be a good read. And you start reading through this, and five minutes later, you're fast asleep. But like anything, you start getting through it slowly but surely. You just chip at it every single day. And you realize that this is what flying the big jets is all about. And I think most pilots, when they start flying, want to do one of two things. Want to go fly supersonic fighter jets, or want to go fly heavy metal. And back in my day, when we were starting out, the 747 was the machine.
Yeah.
These days, we've got the 380s and 350s and various other smart jets. But I never saw, however, the opportunity to get my hands on heavy metal, especially in South Africa. With our limited aviation network, especially now with South African Airways no longer existing. One realized that if they wanted to do that kind of flying, we would have to start looking at opportunities overseas.
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, I wasn't looking for this opportunity. It kind of
came up.
Someone suggested it to me, and it triggered that little thought in my head. And I followed the channels. And in terms of influential people that through my career, there have been so many. And one of the most influential ever was a very good family friend, a guy called Kearney, ex-SA pilot. And he used to mentor me from a very young age when I was still in primary school days and high school days. And he was probably one of my biggest mentors. And I used to speak to him hours on end and pick his brain. He probably got sick and tired of this little snot nose on his case the whole time. But well, Manny, if you're listening, I'd like to thank you very much for all you've done for me in my career. And then there were so many guys, Captain James Lloyd at Aquarius, all my instructors who got me through my 737 training courses, all the Dash 8 instructors. Every single one of those guys left some sort of influence in my life. And it's been just an incredible honor working with everyone. And my mates. I mean, I think if it wasn't for our mates pulling each other through our flying careers at various stages when we were doing commercial licenses or ratings, one can't do it on their own. You need that support from your friends and colleagues. So,
there's a word for it. My mom often used to, she used to shake her head at us and say, "You bunch of oaks, all a bunch of woolly stretchers," because as soon as one guy progresses, the rest of the pack's going to follow. And that was that's true what you say. Your circle of influence is very, very important.
Oh, absolutely. We had to have it because it's extremely difficult to do it on your own.
Yeah. The one thing I know about you, John, as well, is you're quite an organized person. I mean, I remember we were bombing along in a caravan in Sudan back in 2004. And it was quite funny, Brian. we get airborne out of Khartoum, we're flying to El Obeid, and
CIA might be listening as well. Like, guys, just throwing.
yeah, it was a long time ago. But old Kearney whops a flask and he says, "Would you like some tea and biscuits?" And I'm like, "We can see Dan." None of the oaks I was flying with at the time, you know, were that organized. John had tea and biscuits for us on our early morning caravan trip down to the South Sudan.
Yeah.
That was when I first realized, yeah, this oak is organized now.
But that's what it's all about, man. I
Absolutely.
picked that up from John, you know, without even knowing him too well. You can just see that about him. Let me rephrase the question for you, John, and not to get political on you at all. Were you ever looking at Spurries or SAA? Was that an option? Or
That was my dream. Since I started flying, it was my dream. And I think I was putting out CVs to SA when the ink was still wet on my license. I think I probably went straight from CAA and sent in a CV probably straight away to SA and updated it. And wow, does fate work in mysterious ways, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And back then it was what an airline, as you all know. One of the world's best airlines, well run, fantastic training. And it's very sad to see how such a great airline has just been destroyed.
Yeah.
And I've got all my friends there, and snacks for that matter. It's devastating to see what's happened. But yes, it was definitely a dream.
Being a South African and being offshore overseas, looking at South African aviation, I know you did touch on it earlier, and you said that you know, we're always a little bit behind in terms of you know, what happens, and certainly from a recovery perspective. You know, looking at, I always say the same thing what you said earlier. Just have a look at North America, and whatever happens there will happen in the rest of the world, just be it with a slight delay. I think what we are seeing, though, is a couple of little airlines pop up. You know, take Semair, for example. That they've proved how resilient they are, and you know, they don't seem to be going away. That they'll be an airline that sticks around. Ryan's obviously heavily involved, family-wise, on the charter side. Do you see maybe a slight shift where you get, take Ryan as an example, but Ryan could end up flying a King Air 200 on a charter airline. You know, he might own parts of the charter airline, but it's still it's a slight change to what's been around the last 20 or so years. The reason I say that is because my old man was in a situation like that. He started executive aerospace, and he flew around King Airs and Hawker Siddeley's for many years. He never went to Spurries. He you know, he flew slightly smaller metal for a long time, and I know he had a massive influence on some youngsters in South Africa. So maybe there's a little shift that's happening. We're talking about mentorship and all this sort of stuff. Maybe this is a good thing in a way for South African aviation. Time will, of course, tell. But there's certainly a shift that has happened, and it's going to be interesting to watch the story develop over the next few years.
No, it definitely will be. And sadly, as we know, South Africa is very limited by its geographical layout. We're not suitable as a hub. There's no real demand for South Africa to really start a long haul service again when you're competing with the big three in the Middle East. Where we are located, we are so lucky to have these smaller towns with so much going, you know. So I definitely think there's going to be a big shift to airlines expanding, flying smaller airplanes into more strategic locations, which Airlink has been doing for years, as you know. And I mean, Roger just seems to be going from strength to strength. Semair seem to be following suit, expanding the whole time, and just taking advantage of new, smaller locations. And people want to travel, right? People are sick and tired of sitting at home. So they're quite happy. If there was a flight from Johannesburg to, as we know, in Tusco Cruise, you can go to the Kruger Park just for a week like that. People are going to do it. They're going to get out. That's right. Around Southern Africa, and it seems like more and more neighboring countries are slowly opening up to South Africa. So there's going to be a massive demand for that. And man, if you've got the opportunity to fly a King Air 200 or a 737-800, you take what you can get.
Yeah,
it doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, it's not about the machine you fly. It's about just flying. And sometimes the small airplanes, I think sometimes a lot more fun as well.
That's a cool answer. I like it. It's exactly in line with our thinking. John, what are the airports around the world been like? I mean, you see all these pictures all the time of derelict airports and that, but it's obviously, is it starting to pick up, or is it just what they're trying to promote? But what's it like?
Last year around Asia, it was dismal. Around most of Asia. Suvarnabhumi Airport in Bangkok, Thailand, one of the world's busiest airport. During the height of the pandemic, the only aircraft flying in and out were freight aircraft and occasionally a passenger aircraft, but just carrying barely freight. That was the worst I ever saw. I'd seen photographs of airports in other places, but aircraft were parked along taxiways, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Thai aircraft and regional aircraft. That hit home pretty hard. It really did. Beginning of this year, things overseas in the US are still pretty quiet, and within a few months, the US is almost back to normal again. Sit-in holds, fly the full arrival, fly the full departure.
Really?
Number 10 on final in the queue. So it's changing, but in a lot of the countries that are slower to open up, it's still very, very quiet. Definitely. So yes, a lot of those pictures that you might have seen on social media were very valid. There's no doubt about it. And it's depressing. Airplanes are meant to fly. They don't look good sitting there rusting in the heat. No good. Yeah.
What's it like as a passenger now to be commuting around? Are you finding it a bit of a hack, for lack of better words? Obviously you're doing a fair amount of that, and what's that like from a passenger's perspective?
Yeah, it's become a lot more difficult. It's totally manageable, but we have to do a PCR test within 24 hours of flying overseas. So get your nose jabs done. Then sometimes you've got to go, depending on which airport you're flying to, you've got to do an antigen test as well. And then you get on board the airplane, and obviously it's all the masks and whatnot. Then you get to the other side, and very often each country's got different quarantine restrictions, so you might not be allowed out your hotel room. And then you sit in your hotel room for a little bit, then fly somewhere else and go through the whole process again. On the other hand, the airport seemed to be managing it a lot better. Right in the beginning, to commute was a shambles because the airport and the airport facilities weren't geared up for it. So it's not difficult. There's just more and more to do now. So when you're preparing to go away on a trip, you've got to make sure your bag is packed, and then you've got to make sure your licenses are up to date, and now you've got to remember to do your PCR test. So there just becomes more and more to remember. I really hope that in a year or two we can talk about PCR tests and people will have forgotten it, and we can forget about all these restrictions in traveling, because it's made commuting not as enjoyable as it used to be, but it's a very small price to pay to still have a job.
Yeah, it must be a little bit, a hell of a lot more stressful, I'm sure, especially with just trying to stay abreast of what needs to be done what particular destination you're going to, because it's not straightforward. One country has a different set of rules to another, and
That's right.
if you get those mixed up, you could end up getting stuck somewhere. So yeah, I can imagine it must be quite stressful.
Yeah, and the rules change on a daily basis,
Mm.
as you know. It's not just in South Africa, but worldwide. They change. So
Yeah.
I feel very sorry for the companies who have to administer crew into thousands of different destinations every single day with various other airlines to make sure that each crew member is fully compliant. You take an Emirates A380 with 18 cabin crew and 4 pilots, and one person has to have a paper that's out to date, and it disrupts the whole flight. So so kudos to the airlines for managing it. It's a task.
True story.
Yeah, that's a real valid point that only someone involved with flying right now would be able to talk about. I mean, I wouldn't have even thought of that. But yeah, it's amazing to chat to you tonight, John. Really, as I said, the time flies on this show. That's an hour we've been chatting about already.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Our friend here, old Gavin Hill, he sums it up perfectly. John, it's been great to have you be part of the aviation journey from our days working in insurance and flight school, contract and airline flying. You've done exceptionally well. Proud of you. I think Gav sums it up there, and I wrote a little thing here for you as well, just to say, and Ryan actually said it this afternoon, so I'm stealing it from Ryan, but he said, you're a very successful man in your own right. Take flight deck aside, all the other things you do. You're a family man. You're interested in a lot of the things I'm interested in. You like going to the bush. You like flying your drone around. You like technology, and you like enjoying life. And it's really nice to see. And I think if we can take something away from tonight, it's that you can be a consummate professional like yourself. You can be flying big, heavy airplanes in exotic parts of the world, but you can still enjoy doing the other things in life. And maybe, although flying aircraft, flying big aircraft are your passion, passion is a strong word. There's a lot of other things that you do that fuel that passion. And I think as South African aviators and South African aviation can be really proud of you and what you have achieved. John, where can guys, where can guys contact you? Facebook, LinkedIn, where do you spend most of your time on socials?
So Facebook, normally, I do have a LinkedIn account. I am not very au fait with it. And I need to chat to you, in fact, about using it.
I don't think you need it though, John, by the sounds of it. I mean, LinkedIn became a big lifeline for us when, in this whole networking thing. And I never knew a huge amount about it until we actually started to use it and saw the benefit of it. But, it really worked for us. But I think, like I said earlier, you've got a real mentoring presence. And I think a lot of the youngsters around the country and even in Africa, certainly with a lot of our clients at Samero, I'm definitely going to record some bits of our video tonight and show it in the class at Samero, and it holds a real value. And maybe if we can leave a thing with you tonight, is that you might regard yourself as being lucky to still have a job, or lucky with this or lucky with that. And a lot of the time, luck is involved, but a lot of the time it's just sheer bloody hard work and determination that has got you to where you are. So well done, John, and keep going with it. Don't stop, because I think there's still a hell of a lot left for you to achieve. And we're going to be watching very closely. It's certainly not going to be the last podcast that you find yourself on, not just the Brian Air podcast, but I think there's going to be a few other podcasts as well that look you up and try and get hold of you.
No, well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. And anyone is most welcome to get in contact with me on any means, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm there. So by all means, and gents, wow, it's been an absolute honor to be talking, having a whiskey, catching up, and just having a fantastic time. So I really, really appreciate you
It's been
inviting.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you,
No,
John.
thanks, John.
And
I definitely looked forward to this evening for a long time. Not because we've been planning this for weeks and weeks and weeks and chatting about it. I'm glad we finally got the opportunity to get this done and have this conversation with you, because it's going to go far and wide, and you've had a lot of valid points to reach out to a lot of guys out there this evening. So thanks again for all your pearls of wisdom.
Don't know about wisdom, but
no, certainly. And I'm pretty sure my dad and my brother are watching this evening. I just wanted to shout out to them quickly, if you don't mind, just to say thanks, guys, for all the help and hard work with helping me jack up the studio a bit. While we took our break, I spent a few weekends learning how to weld and cut wood, and spent some good time with my dad building this contraption, which turned out okay. But I very quickly realized
that's not okay. That's a serious piece of kit you got in the background there, and we're gonna need one of those for our studio at Simera.
No, I'm quite chuffed with it. But I mean, it was a learning curve for me, because I always thought, I'm pretty sure I can grind and weld, and man, it turns out that I must maybe just stick to flying airplanes or podcasting and let the pros do that kind of stuff.
That's a great job. Wait, must guys contact you, Ryan? What's because I think there's going to be a few people that say, "How can I hook up one of those shelves at my place?"
No, my dad's keen. No, get hold of me, and we'll put you in touch.
Okay. No, awesome. And just thanks to everyone that tuned in and listened tonight. Obviously, we can't do it without you. Really do appreciate it. Makes a big difference doing it in front of a nice audience, and there was a nice amount of live viewers tonight. It's really, really cool. We'll be back next week. We got Phil Parsons on the live show next week, ex-Spurry's pilot. And of course, Ryan and I will be doing the usual Friday show in the studio. That'll come out Friday morning. Thank you for your support. We're going to be here. So if you have anything that you want to let us know, please shoot me a message. Janet Klutter, that's been watching tonight, she's sending me a lot of information. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Janet. And everyone else that sends the odd message, and not just of support, but of information. I think people assume that we have all the information, and we certainly don't. We need to be sent the stuff. We're not that good at finding everything just yet. But and John, thank you for being here. It's been awesome as always. And Ryan,
thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Until next week,
John. Thanks, man.
We'll say goodbye for now. Cheers, everyone.
Guys.
Cheers, guys.
Take care.
Bye.